The sun glowed like molten gold over the crystal blue waters of Cape Town's coastline, casting an ethereal light upon the Grand Owalabi Resort. A sprawling wallaby, the billionaire businessman who had built a financial empire from the ground up, was finally marrying Zara Daniels, the dazzling socialite and heiress to the Daniels luxury fashion dynasty. Their union wasn't just a wedding, it was a merger of power, wealth, and influence that would make headlines across Africa and beyond. The world's elite had gathered here not only to witness love, but to bask in its glow, hoping to be part of an event that would be whispered about for generations. The driveway to the resort was lined with Rolls Royces, Bentleys, and Maybach, each carrying A-list guests whose names graced the covers of magazines. The entrance was a vision of opulence. White orchids draped over golden archways, shimmering chandeliers suspended from trees, and security personnel dressed in designer suits, ensuring no uninvited guests would breach the event. Inside, the venue was a masterpiece of excess. A hall made entirely of glass overlooked the ocean, with a custom-made Swarovski crystal aisle that reflected the heavens. The florists had outdone themselves. Rare blue roses, flown in from Morocco, adorned the tables, and centerpieces overflowed with imported tulips, making the entire venue a fragrant dream. A 30-foot ice sculpture of the couple, their names engraved in gold, stood at the center of the cocktail reception, a testament to just how grand this wedding was. On one end of the ballroom, business tycoons clinked their glasses of vintage Dom Perignon, whispering about the billions that would be merged through this marriage. On the other, international celebrities laughed over caviar and lobsters, their designer gowns trailing across the marble floors. Politicians, royalty, and moguls from Lagos to Dubai had all flown in, eager to be part of this once-in-a-lifetime event. And yet, amidst the glitz and glamour, something felt off. In a room where guests flaunted gowns worth fortunes, one woman stood out. She was dressed in an exquisite red lace gown that clung to her figure like it was woven onto her skin. Her eyes, dark and piercing, scanned the room with an intensity that unsettled those who noticed her. Unlike the other women, she wore no extravagant jewelry, no designer labels, just the bold defiance of crimson in a sea of gold and ivory. She wasn't here to celebrate, she was here for a purpose. Zara, radiant in her custom Elie-Saab bridal robe, stood in a private suite surrounded by her bridesmaids. Makeup artists dabbed at her already flawless skin, her hairstylist fixed the last strand of her diamond-encrusted tiara, and her mother fussed over a final $500,000 pearl-encrusted veil that had been flown in from Italy. As the preparations reached their final moments, a hotel staff member knocked softly on the door. "Miss Zara, a message for you," he said, extending a cream-colored envelope sealed with wax. Zara took the envelope, frowning. She wasn't expecting any messages. Curious, she slid her manicured fingers under the wax seal and pulled out a single sheet of paper. Her breath caught in her throat. The message was typed in an elegant but chilling font. "Don't marry him. He's not who you think he is." Zara felt the blood drain from her face. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched the note, her heart pounding in her chest like a war drum. Who had sent this? What did it mean? She turned the note over, but there was no signature, no indication of its sender. The only thing she knew for sure was that it had been placed in her hands just hours before she was set to walk down the aisle. Her mother, Margaret Daniels, noticed the shift in Zara's expression. "Sweetheart? What is it?" Zara hesitated. The last thing she needed was her overbearing mother blowing things out of proportion. "It's nothing," she lied, forcing a smile. But it wasn't nothing. Something inside her whispered that this wasn't just a prank. This was a warning. Taking a deep breath, she folded the note and slipped it into the pocket of her silk robe. She couldn't let anything ruin today. Not after the months of planning, not after the millions spent, not after the world had its eyes on her. And yet, in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered, "What if it's true?" Meanwhile, Tunde Owolabi stood in his private suite, a tailor adjusting the final touches on his Tom Ford tuxedo. His groomsmen, all powerful men in their own right, laughed and toasted him with shots of Louis XIII cognac. But Tunde was only half listening. His mind was elsewhere. His phone vibrated on the table. He excused himself, stepping onto the private balcony overlooking the beach. When he answered the call, his voice was low. "What do you want?" A woman's voice replied, smooth yet edged with tension. "We need to talk. Now." Tunde clenched his jaw. "This isn't the time, Amina." "Make time," she snapped, "or I'll do it my way." Tunde exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. He had worked too hard for this day to let his past destroy it. After a long pause, he whispered, "Fine. 5 minutes. Meet me by the garden entrance." Hanging up, he stared out at the endless ocean, his jaw tight. There were some secrets a man could never outrun. Outside, the celebration continued. The cameras flashed, the music swelled, the guests reveled in luxury. But beneath the surface, the perfect wedding was already beginning to crack. The mysterious woman in red watched from the shadows, a knowing smile playing at her lips. She knew something Zara didn't. And before the night was over, everyone in that room would know the truth. The morning sun bathed the Owolabi resort in golden light, illuminating the pristine white pillars and cascading floral arrangements that had cost a fortune. The ocean breeze whispered through the silk-draped altar, and the sound of violinists practicing filled the air. It was supposed to be the most perfect morning of Zara Daniels' life. Instead, it was the beginning of a nightmare. Zara sat in front of a massive mirror in her bridal suite, a team of stylists putting the final touches on her look. The delicate Elie Saab wedding gown, worth millions, draped her like something from a fairy tale, shimmering with intricate beadwork. Her diamond earrings sparkled, her silk veil cascaded behind her, and her flawless makeup made her look like an ethereal goddess. But beneath it all, she was unraveling, because Tunde was missing. It had started as a small delay. At first she was told that he was running late. But as the minutes stretched into an hour, whispers began to circulate among the wedding staff. By the time the sun reached its peak, a sense of unease had settled over the venue. "Where is he?" Zara finally snapped, gripping her phone so tightly her French manicured nails dug into her palm. Her best friend and maid of honor, Linda, exchanged a nervous glance with Zara's older brother, David. "We're looking into it," Linda said carefully. David, always the practical one, adjusted his cufflinks and pulled out his phone. "No one's seen him since last night." Zara's stomach twisted. Last night. That note. She had brushed it off as a cruel prank, but now the warning echoed in her mind like a death knell. The first signs of trouble reached the media within minutes. A well-known gossip blogger, invited to cover the African royal wedding, had overheard hushed conversations between the wedding coordinators. She sent out a cryptic tweet. "Breaking. Trouble in paradise. Billionaire groom Tunde Owolabi is missing on his wedding day." The tweet exploded. Within half an hour, paparazzi started gathering outside the resort gates. Drones circled above, and reporters shoved microphones at bewildered guests. Zara could feel the walls closing in. Her perfect life, the one carefully built for public consumption, was about to implode in real time. David didn't waste time. He marched straight to security and demanded access to the resort's surveillance cameras. Zara, Linda, and a few close family members huddled around the small screen in the security office, their breaths held as the footage played. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m. On the screen, Tunde stepped into the dimly lit garden, dressed in his black tuxedo. His movements were tense, his shoulders stiff. Then she appeared, the mysterious woman in red. The room fell into a stunned silence. They watched as she confronted Tunde, her hands moving animatedly as she spoke. He tried to walk away, but she grabbed his wrist. He yanked it free and turned his back on her, only for her to pull a small envelope from her clutch and press it against his chest. Zara gasped. Tunde stopped. His expression shifted. Not anger, not annoyance, but something close to fear. The footage ended. "What the hell was that?" David demanded. Linda whispered. "Who is she?" Zara couldn't speak. She knew the answer before it was spoken. The door to the security room slammed open. Zara's father, Richard Daniels, stormed in, his face dark with fury. A powerful man in his own right, Richard was the CEO of a global fashion empire, a man who had built everything from the ground up, and he had never approved of Tunde. "This wedding is over," he declared, his deep voice reverberating through the room. Zara's head snapped up. "What?" Richard clenched his fists. "That woman in the footage? Her name is Amina Hassan, and she's here to ruin your life." The room went completely still. Richard looked at his daughter, his gaze heavy with the weight of knowledge. "I warned you," he said, voice tight. "Tunde is not the man you think he is. If you marry him, you'll regret it." Zara didn't listen. She stormed out of the room, her gown trailing behind her like a ghost, pushing past stunned guests and clueless wedding planners. She needed answers, and she was going to get them now. In the resort's main lobby, the woman in red, Amina Hassan, stood near the grand piano, completely unaffected by the chaos she had caused. Her red gown still clung to her like blood, her dark eyes unwavering as she watched Zara approach. Zara's voice was sharp. "Where is Tunde?" Amina's lips curled into a slow, knowing smile. "Funny. I was about to ask you the same thing." Zara's patience snapped. "I don't know who you are or what you want, but you need to leave. Now." Amina laughed softly, not the kind of laughter that came from amusement, but the kind that carried years of pain. "You don't know who I am?" she murmured. "Then let me introduce myself." She reached into her purse and pulled out a single photograph. She turned it toward Zara, and Zara's world shattered, because in the photograph was Tunde, and in his arms was a small boy. Amina's voice was ice. "Meet Tunde's son, the one he abandoned." Zara felt like the ground had been ripped from beneath her feet. "No," she whispered, "that's not possible." Amina stepped closer, lowering her voice so only Zara could hear. "He told me the same thing," she said, "right before he left me, right before he disappeared from my life as if I never existed." Zara's hands shook as she took a step back. "You're lying." Amina arched a brow. "Am I?" Her voice was soft but lethal. "I wonder," Amina mused, tilting her head. "When he disappeared from my life, was he already with you?" The question landed like a dagger. Zara turned ice cold, because deep down she already knew the answer, and suddenly the perfect wedding of the century felt like the worst mistake of her life. The luxury resort, once a haven of elegance and romance, now felt like a ticking time bomb. Zara Daniels sat motionless in her bridal suite, staring at her reflection in the grand mirror. The silk veil draped over her shoulders like a weight she could no longer bear. She had dreamt of this day for years, the perfect man, the perfect love, the perfect wedding. But now her perfect world was crumbling around her. And then, just when she thought things couldn't get worse, Tunde walked back into her life. It was hours before the wedding. The door burst open, and there he was, Tunde Owolabi, looking disheveled in his unbuttoned tuxedo shirt, his usually impeccable hair slightly out of place. His dark eyes, always so composed, were wild with urgency. "Zara, you have to listen to me," he said, stepping toward her. David, standing protectively beside his sister, immediately blocked his path. "You have some nerve showing up here after disappearing all morning," he snapped. Tunde ignored him, his gaze locked on Zara. "Please, baby, don't let Amina get into your head. She's lying." Zara stood, her hands trembling at her sides. "Lying? She showed me a photo of your son, Tunde." Tunde sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. It's not what you think. Yes, Amina and I were together years ago, but she's bitter because I ended things. She's been trying to ruin my life ever since. This is just another one of her games." Linda, still clutching Zara's veil, scoffed. "So you're saying she made up a whole child?" Tunda hesitated. "The child exists, but—" Zara's breath hitched. "So it's true." Tunde reached for her hands, his voice soft. "Yes, but she never told me about him until recently. I only found out a few months ago." A sharp laugh escaped David. "Oh, how convenient." Tunde shot him a glare before turning back to Zara. "I love you, Zara. Only you. Don't let her take this day away from us." His words should have comforted her, should have been enough to make her believe him, but something felt off. Despite the tension, the wedding rehearsal proceeded as planned. The event coordinators, desperate to salvage the day, ushered the bridal party into the grand ballroom, where the final details were being perfected. The massive crystal chandeliers glittered above as staff hurried to adjust floral arrangements and seating placements. Every element screamed perfection, but Zara's heart was in turmoil. And then, in the middle of the rehearsal, Amina arrived. She wasn't stopped by security. She wasn't escorted out. She walked straight in, like she belonged. Dressed in a deep emerald gown, Amina was a stunning force of nature, her posture radiating pure confidence. Every head turned, every whispered conversation halted, and in one fluid motion, she reached into her clutch, pulled out a USB drive, and flung it toward Zara. It landed at her feet. "Go ahead," Amina said, voice smooth as silk. "Play it." Tunda tensed. "Don't, Zara." Amina smirked. "Afraid of the truth, darling?" The room was suffocating with tension. Zara bent down, picked up the USB, and turned to the event's tech team. "Play it," she commanded. The screen flickered to life, and what they saw made the entire room gasp. The video showed a beautiful engagement ceremony, gold decorations, hundreds of guests, and at the center of it all, Tunde, dressed in traditional agbada, standing beside a gorgeous woman in an intricate gel. He was holding her hands, staring into her eyes, promising her forever. A date appeared at the bottom corner. 1 year ago, a choked sound left Zara's throat. She recognized the woman, Mariam Lawal. She wasn't just any woman. She was the daughter of one of the wealthiest oil magnates in Nigeria, a woman who had mysteriously disappeared from the social scene after rumors of a broken engagement. Now Zara knew why. Linda covered her mouth in shock. David's entire body tensed with fury. Guests shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting between the screen and Tundo. The video ended. Silence. Then Amina spoke, her voice sharp as a blade. "Still think I'm lying, Tunda?" Zara turned to Tunde, her vision blurry with betrayal. "Tell me this is fake. Tell me this isn't real." Tunda exhaled, looking exhausted. "Zara, tell me." He looked down, and that was all the confirmation she needed. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. Everything had been a lie. Had he ever truly loved her, or was she just another stepping stone in his pursuit of power and wealth? A tear slid down her cheek, but she wiped it away before anyone could see. She would not let him break her. Not in front of the world. Zara lifted her chin, her voice ice cold. "Get out." Tunde's eyes widened. "What?" "You heard me," she said. "Leave. This wedding is off." The room exploded into whispers. David stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. "You heard my sister. Leave. Now." For the first time, Tunde looked panicked. He turned to Zara, his voice desperate. "Zara, please, we can fix this." She let out a hollow laugh. "Fix what? The web of lies you built, or the 2 women you betrayed before me?" Tunde's jaw clenched. He turned to Amina, his voice filled with venom. "You did this." Amina smirked. "No, darling, you did this to yourself." With that, she walked out. Tunde stood there, breathing heavily, the weight of the scandal sinking in, his empire, his reputation. It was all crumbling. But then something unexpected happened. Zara took a deep breath and turned to the wedding planner. Continue with the preparations. The entire room froze. Linda's eyes nearly bulged. What? Zara's expression was unreadable. This wedding is still happening. David frowned. Are you serious? She met Tunde's stunned gaze. But the groom might not be who everyone expected. Gasp echoed through the ballroom. Tunde took a step forward. Zara, what are you saying? She gave him a slow, knowing smile. You'll find out soon enough. And with that, she turned on her heel and walked away, leaving a stunned Tunde, a victorious Amina, and a wedding that was about to take the biggest twist of all. The grand ballroom of the Cape Town resort was a masterpiece of luxury and elegance. Towering floral arrangements lined the aisle, casting a fragrant spell over the air. A shimmering chandelier bathed the venue in golden light, and a string quartet played a soft, enchanting melody. Despite the turmoil of the last 24 hours, the wedding was still on. Or so it seemed. Guests murmured in hushed tones, their eyes flickering with anticipation and curiosity. The tension in the air was palpable. No one knew exactly what was about to unfold. And then the music changed. The massive doors at the far end of the ballroom swung open. Zara Daniels had arrived. Zara was breathtaking. Dressed in an exquisite hand-embroidered gown adorned with crystals, she looked every bit the royal bride the media had proclaimed her to be. A diamond-studded tiara rested atop her sleek, low bun, and a cascading veil trailed behind her like liquid silver. But beneath the graceful poise and radiant beauty, her heart was a battlefield. The betrayal, the humiliation, the anger, it was all still fresh. Yet she had chosen to walk down this aisle, not for love, not for Tunde, but for something far greater than herself. As she stepped forward, a murmur rippled through the crowd. All eyes were on her, admiring, wondering, questioning. And then she saw her, Amina, standing at the back of the room, holding the hand of a small boy. Zara's heart stopped. Amina stood tall, her emerald dress hugging her curves as she stared at Zara with an expression that was both triumphant and unapologetic. But it wasn't Amina that stole Zara's breath away. It was the child beside her, a little boy, no older than 4, dressed in a tiny black tuxedo. His resemblance to Tunde was undeniable. Same sharp jawline, same deep-set eyes, same dimple that only appeared when he was thinking. Zara felt her pulse pound in her ears. This was his son. The guests were still oblivious. The music played on. The moment was supposed to be magical. But then Amina moved forward, and she did something no one expected. She shouted, "Your groom is a liar! This is his son!" The entire room froze. Then came the gasps, the whispers, the stunned expressions. The media, who had been instructed to remain discreet, sprang into action. Camera flashes erupted like lightning, capturing every second of the unfolding scandal. Zara stood motionless in the middle of the aisle, her veil fluttering as if caught in a storm. The words echoed in her head, "This is his son." Her grip on her bouquet tightened. Up ahead at the altar, Tunde's face drained of color. Amina took a step closer, her voice sharp as glass. "Go on, Tunde. Tell your bride the truth. Tell her how you abandoned your own child just to keep up your perfect, spotless image." The guests erupted into murmurs. Some gasped. Some shook their heads in disgust. Others simply stared, fascinated by the scandal playing out before them. Zara slowly turned her gaze to Tunde. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was deadly calm. "Is it true?" Tunde's lips parted, but no words came out. "Is it true?" He swallowed hard. "Zara, let's not do this here." "Answer me," she snapped, her voice ringing through the vast ballroom. Silence. Then, finally, "Yes," Tunde admitted. "It's true." The room exploded into chaos. Gasps, whispers, camera flashes. Guests exchanged looks of shock and disbelief. Tunde tried to speak, but Zara's gaze burned through him. "You knew all along," she said, her voice dangerously soft. "You knew about this child, and you still let me stand here believing we had a future?" Tunde took a step forward. "I was afraid of losing you. I thought if I told you, you'd walk away." Zara let out a cold, hollow laugh. "You thought I'd walk away," she repeated, shaking her head. "No, Tunde, you lied, you manipulated, you built our relationship on a foundation of secrets and deceit, and you thought I'd never find out?" Tunde ran a hand through his hair, desperate. "Zara, I love you. I was going to tell you." "But you didn't," she cut in, "and you never would have. You were just hoping the truth would never come out." Tunde opened his mouth to protest, but before he could, slap! The sound echoed across the ballroom. The entire room gasped in shock. Zara had just slapped him across the face. Her hand still tingled from the impact, but she felt nothing but pure, burning rage. Tunde stood frozen, his jaw clenched, a red mark forming on his cheek. Zara's eyes gleamed with finality. "This wedding is over," she said, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Zara turned on her heel, her silk gown sweeping across the marble floor, the golden aisle runner crinkled beneath her determined steps. The media caught every second. The billionaire's daughter, the socialite bride, the woman who was supposed to have the wedding of the century, walking away. The guests whispered, stunned beyond words. Some admired her courage, others pitied her. But Zara didn't care. She would not be humiliated. She would not marry a liar. And as she reached the exit doors, Amina caught her gaze, just for a moment. There was no gloating in Amina's expression, no smugness, just understanding, and perhaps a little bit of respect. Zara nodded once. Then she stepped out of the ballroom into the unknown. She had walked into that wedding a bride. She walked out a free woman. What's next? Will Zara regret walking away from Tunde? What will the media say about the scandal? Is this the end of the African royal wedding, or just the beginning of a bigger twist? The grand wedding had ended in disaster. What was meant to be a union of power and prestige had unraveled into the biggest scandal of the year. The next morning, the world awoke to headlines that shook high society to its core. Billionaire groom exposed. Love child scandal ends wedding of the year. The African royal wedding turns into a nightmare. Zara Daniels walks out. Tunde Owolabi's dark secrets revealed. The media was ruthless. For Tunde, the consequences were immediate and catastrophic. Just days ago, Tunde Owolabi had been one of the most powerful men in Africa. Now his empire was crumbling. The scandal sent shockwaves through the business world. Board members of his multi-billion-dollar conglomerate distanced themselves. Investors began pulling out. Stocks in his company plummeted. Calls went unanswered. Deals fell apart. Once loyal allies turned their backs on him. At a high-stakes board meeting, the verdict was clear. "Your personal scandal is jeopardizing the company, Tunde," one of the directors said coldly. "You need to step down, effective immediately." Tunde's jaw clenched. "I built this empire from nothing." "And you've brought it to its knees," another board member interrupted. Within a week, Tunde was forced out of his own company. The mighty had fallen, but Zara's victory came at a cost. Though she had walked away from the disastrous wedding, her family's business wasn't spared from the fallout. Her father, Chief Daniels, had spent decades building their luxury real estate empire. Their name was a symbol of class, elegance, and exclusivity, but now they were a punchline. No investor wanted to be associated with the scandalous bride who walked away at the altar. Major clients canceled contracts, business deals fell apart, and to make matters worse, the media wouldn't let it go. Journalists camped outside their mansion, desperate for an interview. Paparazzi hounded Zara's every move. "What happened with Tunde? Do you regret walking away? Was the wedding just a business deal?" Zara ignored them, but inside the damage had been done. Her father, once a pillar of strength, was livid. You should have handled this differently, he told her, his voice like steel. You wanted me to marry him, even after everything? Zara shot back, her voice trembling with emotion. I wanted you to be smarter, Chief Daniels snapped. You think walking away like that made you a hero? It made us a joke. Zara felt the sting of his words, but she refused to let guilt consume her. She had done the right thing. She just needed to figure out what came next. Zara found solace in the one person she thought she could trust, Linda, her best friend. For years, Linda had been her rock, the sister she never had, the one person who always had her back. But now, as the dust settled, a truth emerged. A truth that shattered Zara all over again. Sitting in her penthouse, Zara turned to Linda, exhaustion evident in her eyes. Did you know? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Linda hesitated, and that was all the answer Zara needed. You knew. Zara, I wanted to tell you. I swear. But you didn't, Zara's voice rose. You let me stand there, thinking I knew the man I was going to marry. Tears welled in Linda's eyes. I thought I was protecting you. I thought if I said anything, it would ruin everything. Zara let out a cold, bitter laugh. You were supposed to be my friend, my sister. Linda's tears spilled over. I made a mistake, Zara, please. But Zara was done. You weren't protecting me. You were protecting him. Silence stretched between them. Then Zara stood up. Leave. Linda's lips trembled. Zara! Leave. Linda grabbed her purse and rushed out, sobbing. And just like that, Zara lost another person she thought she could trust. The pressure became too much. The media, the betrayal, the heartbreak. Zara disappeared. She booked a private flight and vanished from the public eye. No one knew where she went. The world speculated. Some said she went to Paris. Others whispered she was in a private island hideaway. The truth? She was in a secluded beach house in Zanzibar, away from the cameras, away from the whispers. For the first time in weeks, she could breathe. She spent her days by the ocean, letting the waves carry away her pain. She spent her nights writing, thinking, rebuilding herself. Slowly, the anger turned into strength. She wasn't just the woman who walked away from a billionaire. She was Zara Daniels, and she would rise again. Just when she thought she was free, Tunda found her. She was sitting on the terrace, staring at the sea, when a familiar voice shattered the peace. Zara. She turned slowly, and there he was, Tunde Owolabi, dressed in a simple shirt and trousers, looking humbled, exhausted, desperate. How did you find me? She asked, her voice cold. Tunda sighed. You forget, Zara. I know you. I know where you'd go when you want to disappear. She said nothing. I lost everything, he admitted. My company, my reputation, my future. But the only thing I truly regret losing is you. Zara's heart hardened. Spare me the speech, Tunde. You're not here because you love me. You're here because you need to fix your image. He shook his head. Number, I swear I came because I want to make things right. I'll do anything. Anything to prove to you that I've changed. Zara stood up, walked up to him, and stared into his pleading eyes. Then she said the words that sealed his fate. I will never forgive you. Tunde flinched as if she had slapped him again. Zara, you had your chance. You lied to me, betrayed me, humiliated me in front of the world, and you think you can just walk in here and fix everything? He looked shattered. I love you, he whispered. Zara's lips curled into a sad, knowing smile. No, Tunde, you love power, and I refuse to be part of your world anymore. She stepped back, and this time, when she walked away, she didn't look back. Will Zara rebuild her life without Tunde? Can she escape the shadow of the scandal? Or will the past come back to haunt her? The scandal was a memory now. The whispers, the betrayals, the heartbreak, all left behind. In the City of Lights, Zara Daniels had reinvented herself. She was no longer the woman who walked away from Africa's most powerful groom. She was something greater. She was Zara Daniels, the force the world never saw coming. It had been 6 months since she left everything behind. Now Paris was her home. Her fashion empire, Zara Luxe, had skyrocketed, becoming one of the most sought-after luxury brands. Women of wealth and power adored her designs, from Monaco to Dubai, from New York to Lagos. Everywhere she went, people recognized her, but not as the runaway bride. Not anymore. Now they saw her for what she truly was, a self-made powerhouse. Though Zara had sworn off love, fate had other plans. Enter Nikolai Petrov, a European billionaire, a business magnate, a man who had everything, except her. They met at an exclusive fashion gala in Monte Carlo. He had been watching her from across the room, tall, mysterious, impossibly charming. Zara Daniels, he had said, raising a glass to her. I finally meet the woman everyone talks about. And what do they say? Zara had asked, arching a brow. That you are power, beauty, and danger wrapped in silk. She had laughed, a real laugh, for the first time in months. Unlike Tunde, Nikolai had nothing to prove. He didn't try to own her. He didn't try to change her. He admired her for what she was, unapologetically fierce. Their connection was effortless. For the first time in a long time, Zara allowed herself to feel Tunde's last attempt. But the past has a way of returning. One evening, as Zara sipped champagne on her Parisian balcony, her phone rang. The name on the screen made her heart pause. Tunde Owolabi. She let the phone ring. Then it rang again and again. With an exasperated sigh, she picked up. What do you want, Tunde? A deep sigh. Then his voice. I had to hear your voice. She stayed silent. I lost everything, Zara, the company, the respect, everything I built. I deserved it. But the only thing I regret losing is you. Zara's heart remained steel. You didn't lose me, Tunde. You threw me away. Silence. Then his voice, soft, broken. I know, and if I could take it all back, I would. Zara closed her eyes, inhaling the crisp Parisian air. The old Zara might have felt pity. The old Zara might have forgiven him. But the woman she was now, she had nothing left to give him. You should move on, Tunde. I already have. Then she hung up, and this time, for good. A queen walks alone. The next morning, Zara stepped out onto the streets of Paris. She wore a gold silk dress, her heels clicking against the pavement. As she walked past the designer boutiques of Avenue Montaigne, heads turned. People whispered, some in awe, some in admiration, but no longer in pity. She wasn't a woman who had been left broken. She wasn't a woman who needed a man to be whole. She was Zara Daniels, a woman who had walked away from betrayal, humiliation, and heartbreak, and instead of falling, she had risen. She had won. Moral of the story: you don't need a man to define your power. You don't need validation to be strong. You don't need permission to rise. Zara Daniels proved that the greatest revenge is success. Like, share, and subscribe. Support us for more powerful stories.